today is a great episode. Often when we're thinking of topics to talk about, it's all about practicality. And there is one specific term I use a lot, as do you and many of our clinicians, that we work with and train on SCAT, the Social Communication Anxiety Treatment Model, which is a CBT-based model. That's called PVC. And the reason I call it PVC, as you know, Dr. Jenna, is we try to come up with terms that people can easily relate to and remember, so that when they're doing the different strategies, when they're planning games, when they're doing goals, they can kind of reach for those kind of known topics that make it easy. And PVC is one of them. You like PVC, right?
Yeah, I use it. I use it all the time.
Yeah. So now our listeners are like, what the heck is PVC? So let's talk about what PVC is. It's an anxiety lowering method, and it incorporates preparing, the use of visuals, and the use of choice questions as a very simple model to use pretty much at any stage of social communication, whether you're at the start of treatment or you're pretty much already verbal, you're beginning to work on initiation, elaboration, expression. Whatever stage you're at, you can utilize a PVC model. So one of the things I thought you could talk about was what happens with anxiety, with your ability to think, plan, communicate. I think you'd be amazing to talk about that.
Yeah, so when I think of anxiety and with the PVC model, many times, and I actually was just having a conversation with one of my clients yesterday about this, I always think of like a scale. And I think of anxiety being on like one end of the scale and then processing being on the other one. And so what's interesting is when our anxiety goes up, our processing goes down. It's kind of like this, so it's like a seesaw. And what happens is the more that we prepare, we bring visuals, we bring choices, our processing goes up. We don't really need time to think and process, so our anxiety goes down. And then that creates kind of more of that even seesaw rather than like this uneven seesaw. So the whole point of the PVC is that it really does minimize our time to think and process. And that's really important because people with anxiety experience that all the time, where they're constantly thinking of the what ifs, the and or all of these different things. So when someone's asking them a question, they freeze, right? It's like, wait, I knew I wanted to say something. I knew I wanted to say something, but they have to process that. So PVC kind of knocks that out. So when they now are questioned, they can utilize and prepare ahead of time, use visuals, use choices. So now when someone asks them a question, their anxiety is a lot lowered. So they're more likely to have an interaction. So that's kind of how I like to describe it and where PVC really helps with anxiety.
I think what stands out a lot to me is that when we work with clients, families, the many different ones over the years that we've worked with, there's so many people that come to us and say, how do I get my kid to talk? How do I get her to answer her teacher? And there's so many families that come to us that their goal was to go up to a store clerk and ask a question, and they will get, points or money or whatever it is they're working on. But what I often say is, what are you doing to support that? How are you, how do these individuals with anxiety and whatever their whys may be are exacerbating their anxiety? And I think that's important because the tools that we use and develop are tools to help lower anxiety and support confidence, connection, and overall progress across that social communication bridge. It's not just get a sticker, get a reward to go up and ask a question if they're not able to do it. So what are the supports? And so much of what we do, whether it's the PVC model, teaching the SM triangle, whether it's, preparing for common questions, handover, takeover, social engagement opportunities, building social connection, loud, large, lots of people invited. There's so many countless methods and different strategies that we use, action plans, sandwich questions, copy backs. There's millions of them. It's how do we put this together as a recipe for a person? It's not just be brave to go up and ask a question. And those that are experienced in the field obviously see that. But it's really important for our listeners that there is no magic bullet. There's no one thing fits all. It's how do you make this unique for every individual? And although PVC is how do we help prepare, whether we do it directly with an individual through games that they prepare for, and countless types of games, or whether it's nonchalantly through parents setting up the world, or, the silent goals, as we call them, versus the active goals. How do we utilize the PVC in many of the strategies? And I think it's important to talk about, the different aspects of preparing. And it's exactly what you said, those whys, whatever they may be. And of course, there's many different whys. The anxiety is created from the whys. And most individuals with selective mutism have multiple whys. It's not just one why typically. And so it's understanding what those whys are and how to support that individual. And of course, that's a big part of what we do through the selective mutism evaluation or interview, is determine what those whys may be, whether we need to dive deeper, and then begin to understand their stages of communication to set up their treatment plan for home, real world, and then school based accommodations and interventions. And I bring this to our listeners because it's not just do a PVC, it's why are you using this method? How do you use it? When do you use it? And where do you use it? So, what happens when we prepare? We create predictability. Talk about the anxiety with that, how that minimizes the need, the kind of the anxiety component of that. And how are ways that you prepare your clients? How do you talk to them about this?
So I think that what's really interesting, and those that work with us know this, is we talk a lot about our anxiety before we do an exposure and maybe after. And one of the reasons we do that is because there's actually something called anticipation anxiety. And really, what that anticipation anxiety is the anxiety around what is this going to look like? What is the scenario going to appear like? How are we going to navigate it? Who's going to ask me questions? What type of experience is it going to be like? So there's a lot of things that are going on for an individual even before they step into an exposure or an interaction. So that anticipation anxiety is really, really high. And most of the time, what we do, and for those listeners that have been here for a while, we've talked about feelings charts before and like other podcasts. Feelings charts are used a lot when we're trying to navigate our feelings, right? Our anxiety. So whether it's for an older teen tween, we use like 5 to 0. For a younger child, we might use 3 to 0. But it's the same type of scale where the higher the number, the more anxiety we have, and the lower the number, the more comfortable. So what's interesting is most of the time when I prepare with my clients, most people will say to me that thinking about going into an exposure, let's say they're going into a birthday party for their friend, it might feel like a 5 or a 3 if it's for a younger child. It might feel really, really hard or scary to do. And then as they're doing that, what's interesting is after they process it, then later on they're like, oh, wait, it actually felt like a 3 when I got home. But the anticipation of it felt really scary. So that's one reason why the P out of the PVC is probably one of the most important components, is that preparation is key. Because if we're already going into these scenarios already feeling like a 3 out of 3 for a younger child or a 5 out of 5, think about how unlikely it is that we're going to go in feeling ready to have some of these social interactions when, that's the whole point of us setting the world up, is to kind of have some of these exposures. So the preparing part could look like many different things. Let's say a child's preparing for a birthday party, right? Maybe it's, looking online to see what does this birthday party look like, asking the parent of the, child whose birthday party it is, like, who's attending, so they can kind of start to visualize what peers are going to be at the birthday party. Maybe they start to think about what questions might people ask. So it's winter time, right? I mean, almost spring, but as Dr. E said, it's been snowing, at least in Philadelphia, for a while. So people might ask, like, have you enjoyed your snow days, or what type of things are you looking forward to for this spring? Are you going away for spring break, right? There's so many questions that you can prepare for. And so as you're hearing, a lot of this isn't just even having the interaction, but rather just preparing for the scenario. So that way we can go in with maybe our anxiety being more like a 1 or 2 out of 3, or maybe like a 3 or 4 even out of 5. So that way it's not totally our most anxiety provoking, but we're going in a little bit more prepared. So that's just an example of a birthday party, but we can totally talk about so many other scenarios as well.
I mean, we could literally do like hours of different scenarios.